We are back discussing Workforce 4.0 with my friend Gerry Zadvani. Gerry, how are you?
Hey Joe, I'm great. How are you?
I'm excellent. And you know, we like to open up these episodes chatting about where in the world is Gerry Zadvani. So you're no longer in New York. Where are you right now, Gerry?
San Francisco, the beautiful city of San Francisco.
Now, business or pleasure?
Business. It's always business.
You sound very serious saying that. So you're not messing around. And we're going to be joined by someone who's not messing around either. His name is Ron Green. He's the co-founder and chief technology officer at KUNGFU.AI. Ron, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on, guys.
Oh, you're very welcome. So I'm in Charleston. Gerry's in San Francisco. You're in Austin, Texas. And before we started recording, you were talking about the fact how much Austin has changed since you've been there. You're not one of these interlopers who just ended up in Austin in 2020, 2021. You've been there for years. So to give folks a little perspective in terms of the tech scene there, because I think we've all heard it. Like I often joke that when I first started doing these business pods, everyone was in Silicon Valley. Then fast forward, everybody's in Austin. Tell me about what that progression has been like in your city.
It's been pretty crazy. You know, I lived here back during the dot-com bubble in the late 90s, early 2000s, and there was a lot of growth at that time. But when the bubble popped, I really thought, oh, well, that's it. You know, that was maybe our big spike in growth. It's hilarious. That was nothing compared to what's happened the last 10 years. And the biggest change is Austin's had a tech scene since the early 80s. Actually, part of what put Austin on the map was the founding of a tech initiative that was a DoD back, that was artificial intelligence related, which we maybe can talk about. But they put it on the map, and there were things like Dell and things like other really major tech vendors, but it was all B2B. Everything here was just sort of B2B based, enterprise software, and it lacked diversity for the longest time. And that's different now. Now in 2025, there's everything. There are robotic startups, there are consumer plays, CPG plays, etc. And it feels like, I don't know, if I'm out at dinner downtown, I feel like every other person is a startup founder here in Austin now.
That's funny. And Gerry, obviously a lot of the work you do is B2B with OSF, but what have you seen, Gerry, in terms of like the people you've been working with? Obviously you're internationally based, but like, tell me about like your connection to Austin.
I visited Austin multiple times, and I know the city quite well. I've been interacting with companies out of Austin in the past 5 years, I would say, and it's impressive how the tech scene has grown in Austin, and it has diversified. I can really relate to what Ron was saying, that it used to be more of a B2B kind of a setup. I think that is a good intersection between what they used to do in B2B with all the new technologies that came online, and that made everything possible. Even the remote work made Austin possible, because it was before the pandemic. Nobody really would embrace remote work that well, and then when that kicked in, Austin was like at least a good second home, if not your headquarters. So that also helped a lot.
All right, so we've paid the Austin tourism spot there, but let's do one more spot, and let's do a quick plug for KUNGFU.AI before we get into the nitty-gritty. Ron, quick plug. Tell us about the company.
Yeah. KUNGFU.AI. We are an AI strategy and engineering firm. We focus on AI exclusively. We have since our founding nearly 8 years ago. We help companies develop their AI strategy. We build, custom bespoke AI solutions for them. Like I said, we've been doing AI since long before AI was cool. It's kind of fun to see the entire field blow up and the hype cycle just go in overdrive.
It's funny you mentioned the fact that you've been doing this, over 8 years with AI, and we often have guests on the podcast who are like you, who've been working in the AI field before, ChatGPT was a thing in 2023, right? So can you take us back? Do you have any memories of those early days when you're trying to explain AI to whether it's potential investors, potential customers? Like, what were those conversations like now then as opposed to now?
Yeah. Oh, it's radically different. I did my master's in artificial intelligence back in the late 90s. So I've been working in AI so long that I remember when it was legitimately overhyped. Like we would we wanted things to work better than they did, but the technology and the data just really wasn't there. Back in, let's say, 2018, all of our clients were early adopter, true believers. For the most part, they would reach out to us and they would say, I know this would be crazy. Would it be possible to solve this one point problem with artificial intelligence? Those days are gone. Now we have people reach out to us, and they for the most part, they say, we need help with AI broadly. Like, how do we get started? How do we develop a strategy? How do we even know whether it's, the investment is worth it on any given initiative, because it's so new to pretty much all the companies out there.
Wow. And so now let's get to the current state of AI, and actually, almost look a little bit forward. Let's not go crazy and look like, what's AI going to be like in 10 years? Because I don't think anyone knows what it's going to be like in 10 years. But what we are seeing, and a theme of this episode of this podcast, has been the workforce, how it's going to immediately affect people. Workforce 4.0 is what Gerry calls it. What are you seeing on the ground now in terms of how, like, whether it's bots, agents, all of that stuff, how does that work into KUNGFU.AI's world right now?
More and more, we're doing, really, there's been an evolution. I think we're on what I would call maybe the third phase of our journey into AI as a company, KUNGFU.AI. In the beginning, it was mostly sort of domain specific problems. We're doing computer vision solutions. We're doing NLP solutions, things like that. ChatGPT came, blew the world up. For a couple of years, it was almost painful. Everybody viewed everything as generative AI. Like, that's pretty much the only way they could imagine interacting with it. And they were blind in many ways to the real difficulty of putting generative solutions into production without human oversight, because it's got that sort of jagged edge of performance where it may perform really well in one use case and then fall down and be be as as dumb as a kindergartner on the next one. And that made it really, really challenging. I'm really happy to say that things have kind of come full circle, and now clients understand that generative AI is one tool, and there are many, many more options out there. And that really the number one thing I preach is, if you have proprietary data that will allow you to build some type of a solution, whether it's predictive analytics, some new capability, it could be generative, it could be anything, but it's domain specific. That's really where you need to spend your time and your money. The next wave, and I think everybody's talking about this, and I think it's a little premature, but I think it's going to come sooner than most people think, is agentic AI. The abilities of these agentic systems is growing at a pretty amazing clip. A paper came out recently was showing that the length of task that these systems can complete successfully is doubling every 7 months, right? And it's been doubling for about 4 or 5 years. There's even some evidence that it's actually 4 months now. So again, we work with people that build AI systems that go into production. So we're very cautious. We tell them, you need to have agentic systems on your radar, and you need to be thinking about them, but you don't need to be racing to put them in production now. They still need a lot of human oversight. But I think that's going to be the number one change to the workforce over the next 5 years.
It's interesting that you mentioned domain specific, that this is where it used to be, but it's somehow coming back to the same area. I would say, maybe call it a little bit differently. Domain specific for me, it's now like an intersection between technology and industry, like deep understanding of your industry, deep understanding of your very specific situation. And you can take a lot of these things that are now being built off the shelf, and you can customize it and make it very specific for your very use case and in your industry, with your entire set of best practices that you've accumulated along the years. So I think, like, especially companies that are here for a while and they are thinking, okay, are we going to have a future? Well, if you treasured your best practices, and if you all the know-how and everything, you created databases of knowledge, then I think you could have a future just by reusing all of that and repackaging it.
Yeah, totally. And one example that I think is perfect, that you described is, we just built a system that went live late last year for a publicly traded company. They're doing roughly 2.5 billion in loan factoring. That system was completely manual, all human decisions. It was business hours, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, 24 to 48 hour turnaround. But because they had this giant wealth of historic data, just like you said, we were able to train a model to make that decision process almost automatic. It's now 9 seconds, worst case, 9 seconds. They moved from business hours to 24/7 stance. You can get loan factoring decisions on Christmas if you want. And because they'd collected so much data, we were able not only to automate this decisioning process, but fraud went down, chargebacks went down. Like, it was just this complete virtuous loop. And it's an example where you can take historic data and really leverage it to do something powerful and transformative for your business. So they saw a $250 million market cap bump when they announced it in their shareholder letter that month.
Wow. And what are you seeing in terms of surprising? Because you mentioned earlier about like how generative AI is just that. It's just literally just the ChatGPTs of the world. But agentic AI is going to be the future. But in terms of what you're seeing now in the playing field of AI, is there something that you've worked with a client that were like, oh, I didn't know it could do that? You know how they always find like whether it's like apple cider vinegar was all of a sudden was like a weight loss cure, when after for 100 years it was just apple cider vinegar. Is there something with AI that you've noticed that's like, oh, I didn't realize we could do that?
I don't exaggerate, but I don't know if there's a client that we've worked with in the last 8 years that wasn't surprised by the capabilities, right? Yeah, there are definitely some who over anticipate or overestimated rather some of the capabilities. Every now and then, once in a blue moon, we'll have a client come in who will think that it's literally like magic. Like, can you point the AI at our data and then just tell it to fix all the problems? But those very, very rare cases aside, most of the clients we work with are just floored by the scope of the capabilities now, and they don't really understand that from like a language understanding, speech recognition, coding capability, math, reasoning, on and on and on. It's either at human level or soon to be at a human level across the board. And that's just scratching the surface.
Wait until you will be able to talk to your AI. That's gonna be quite transformative. It's like very natural way of communicating with the AI. We've been doing some things like some POCs. Now you've seen the models that are coming out now. Okay, how can we bring this into some real use cases? And the results are mind blowing. It's like, wow. It's because humans would much rather communicate in a more natural way to a system than like the old way of typing and whatnot.
That's exactly right.
And Ron, what do you see in terms of with this AI and the capabilities? One of the things that the cold hard facts of it is just the amount of jobs that may be lost by it. And you are seeing how a lot of either tech founders or CEOs have been very, I don't want to say heartless, but they've been almost like proud of the fact that they're developing something that's going to put a lot of people out of work. You as a tech founder, how do you balance that? Because you as a futurist and thinking in the future, you kind of see, you read between the tea leaves, all that jazz in terms of looking at the future. But there's also the human element that you have people on the boots on the ground now working. How do you balance that and in a way that it doesn't come across as just being a complete a-hole, which essentially a lot of these founders are looking like right now?
And they really are. It's ridiculous in my mind. AI really can be and should be augmentative as much as possible. The idea that you're just going to come in and leverage this new technology and put a bunch of people on the street. That's not why I've spent my career trying to build intelligent systems. Right now, look, I get it. That's going to be a side effect. I like to joke with people. They'll ask me, is AI coming for my job? And I say, look, AI is coming for all of our jobs eventually, right? Like, but it's going to be a much slower and sort of fractal process over time. It's going to replace parts of tasks, and certainly some tasks are going to be eliminated entirely. But, 5 years ago, it was predicted that radiologists would be completely out of work by now. That's not the case. Closing that gap on that last 5% is enormously hard from just a completely, eliminating a human job perspective. I'm super optimistic about the future, and I feel like, I get it. Um, you know, Change is tough. When the camera was invented, they thought that was the end of, portraiture and painting. And when, film photography and video was invented, they thought that was going to be the end of plays. No, no, no. It just expands the landscape on what we can do. And so I'm extremely, extremely excited about what AI can do, but I'm not blind to the consequences. And last thing I'll say on that, I'm actually kind of happy that probably the most disrupted field is my own. It's computer programming, right? If there's any field that has been somewhat, I won't say automated, but augmented in a maybe a negative way, it's been software programming. And I think that that's deliciously ironic, and I love it.
Yeah, indeed, it's a little bit ironic, but like up until now, I've even in programming, I haven't seen something that has been done from top to bottom by AI completely, with all the corner cases and especially all the integrations to sometimes very legacy systems that are neither here nor there. And you have to figure out a way around all of these things. Yeah, it will definitely accelerate some tasks. It will definitely accelerate some areas that even in programming, it's now when you're looking at it, it's absurd why it's taking so long. But there will be some other areas, like think of just technical debt. Technical debt it has been always a big issue in our industry, like things that you would leave behind because now because you have more time, you can figure out some of these things. I think that first we will not see necessarily people being let go. I think first we will see for sure an increase in quality, an increase in speed. This is what's going to happen, the first step. And then we're going to start shifting the way we work. I still, there is so much work to be done. There is so much, like just your imagination stops you from actually see what else we can do. And it's definitely, I don't see it as oh, okay, these jobs are going to be gone. They are going to transform for sure.
And Ron, let's get into the data piece a little bit, because I'm an old school radio guy, Ron, and we used to have this adage that said garbage in, garbage out. Like if you recorded something poorly, there was nothing you could do to fix it, right? And
Right.
so I think about this when it comes to building these AI systems. If you don't have the right data to build upon, what you're creating on the back end is going to be crap. It's like garbage in, garbage out. How are these companies that you're working with, in terms of like, they've got data, I'm sure, but do they have the right data? Is it organized correctly? Like, tell me about that, because that's one of the things that people don't seem to really be discussing when it comes to this AI revolution. Like, the data has to come from somewhere. And we've all heard the stories about, scraping of Google and Reddit and all that stuff. But for companies that are using it for B2B, it's like they're mostly their internal data. So
Right.
what is it like behind the scenes, like under the hood, in terms of the data that they're going to use for these agentic AI projects?
Yeah, no, you couldn't be more right. There's an old joke, we've been telling this for a decade, like that the dirty secret of artificial intelligence is it's like 80% data cleanup, right? You're mucking with the data. We have a really, really sort of strong opinion about the methodology, and it's that it has to be front loaded with two things. One is, even before the data, is you've got to make sure that you have business ROI associated with the initiatives, and that you can articulate what the key performance metrics are. You'd be shocked at the number of systems that we've seen built where they built the system and then they had no way to know whether it was performing well, or even if it was performing well, what impact that might have on the business. But just taking that, I think, obvious blocking and tackling for granted, the second phase is the data. traditional software, you have an idea, you want to go implement it. Great. There's nothing stopping you but your own imagination, your own your own capabilities. With AI systems, and specifically AI systems that are supervised learning based, which is most of them today, you're beholden to the data. If you don't have the data, you can't do anything. If you have bad data or you have skewed data or biased data and you train your model, the model will suck up all that bias and replicate it. So what we do is we always fast fail on these initiatives. If a client of ours has an idea for something they want to do, um, you have to go and vet the data before you do anything else. And there's really two parts to that. One is, do you have the volume, the quantity, the quality of data that you need? And can you access it? Again, you'd be surprised. I'm sure you see this all the time, how often it's like, yeah, we have the data, but it's spread out across these 10 data stores and there's no way to get it together. And then the second part is you've got to figure out what the signal is in that data. You may have relational tables with thousands of rows. We'll see this all the time. And, 80% of the signal is coming from 4 columns, and you need to do the work. You got to roll up your sleeves to suss that out. Once you've identified all of those 4 things, you've got alignment on the ROI, the KPIs, the data volume, and the data quality, then you can go to modeling and start tackling those downstream tasks. And we just see this over and over again. Too many companies just want to skip those first 4 steps.
I think the data in itself, it's structuring it and making sense of it from a business point of view, understanding how different pieces relate to each other, connecting it with each other, and then consuming it, because as you mentioned, the volume and then different systems can be an issue. And then in some cases, there is also this synthetic data that you can actually create if you know what you're doing and you understand the space. That's I would say 60-70% of the AI work. I'm not sure what's your take on it, but like, this is what I've seen, that most of the work is being done.
Yeah, it's a tremendous amount of the work. And like you said, it really depends upon the organization and their level of maturity. And synthetic data can be a great call in certain circumstances, especially in scenarios where you have really sort of a skewed circumstance, like fraud is a really classic example we see over and over again, where luckily fraud is pretty uncommon, but that means you're typically dealing with a limited data source. So if you can mimic that data distribution through statistical techniques and synthetic data techniques, it can really make a difference.
And what are you seeing, Ron, in terms of the idea that a company now has to be an AI company? For a couple of years, Gerry and I had this running joke where I would say, people say if you're a business, you're also a technology business, and I would rile Gerry up because he hated that, he said it make no sense. Like, if you're a butcher, you're not a technology company. But now all of a sudden you're seeing these companies who weren't AI companies are now AI companies, and we've all seen it where when you go to a VC or you go to angel, they're not looking at you unless you have like AI in that first sentence. And obviously, we've stated you've been doing this for a while. What's it like now seeing all these people saying they are now AI companies? Does that kind of rankle some feathers there for you, Ron?
No, that's such a great question. No, it doesn't at all, because if you've been doing this as long as I have, the dream was to get AI to work, right? So for us to be in this state where people are jumping on the AI hype train, that means we finally figured it out. We're doing something right. And back during the internet.com bubble, everybody overnight was an internet company. These are normal, I think, sort of business hype cycle things. The difference is that and I granted, I will admit that this is a very self-serving thing I'm about to say, but AI is really different than these other cycles. If you look at the PC revolution or the internet or mobile, all of those different technical ways, there was a component on which the next generation could build upon the first. And there was this sort of positive feedback loop. AI is different. And it's really over the last year where we're starting to see the next generation models being trained by the previous generation models. So there's this feedback loop specifically around this sort of technique called reinforcement learning with verifiable rewards, that we're going to get into this positive flywheel where we're going to look back in a few years and we're going to say, my God, that went fast, because this is the first time in our history as a species where we have a technology that can increasingly be used almost autonomously to train the next generation of technology.
I'm maintaining my view is just because you have an AI chatbot on your website somewhere, that doesn't mean you are an AI company. And even more so, you should make sure that you don't lose focus from your core business. Understanding your core business, understanding the core industry. Yeah, you can build AI on top of it. You can harvest everything that you have in your organization and put AI to kind of make it better and faster. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't transform you into an AI company just because
Very
you
well
have
said.
some features and
Yeah.
functionalities.
I couldn't agree more. Really well said. I got to tell you a funny joke. When ChatGPT came out, I'd say the first half of 2023, we literally had potential clients calling us up and say, "Hey, can we get some AI?" And we would say, "Well, what do you need? What do you need?" And they would say, "I do not care. I just need some AI, or the board is going to kill me." Like, that's kind of how,
Let me sell you 1 pound of AI.
how much for 1 pound of AI?
Well, Ron, to the question I was about to ask you is like, when is AI not necessary? Like, is AI for the sake of AI? And you kind of use an example there, but like, to me, I'm seeing it how it works out. Like the fact that like Meta incorporates AI into Facebook and Instagram, like what is this doing here? Like, why do I need that here? Like Snapchat has like an AI bot that you can talk to. So like, where does it get to the point? And I know obviously this is when you're making a limit off of this, Rod, so I'm not telling you to lose money here, but in terms of like the idea of using AI just for the sake of AI, that to me seems crazy.
And it's a waste of time and it's a waste of money. We'll see. We frequently, more frequently than you would imagine, will work with our clients and stop them from investing money in an AI initiative that's either something that they could buy off the shelf, or that there's not going to be a return on the investment. It just looks cool. It just feels cool. And maybe there was some excitement internally from the company, but it's just an absolute complete waste of time and money. Happens all the time.
I would think of a few cases and where AI is totally not necessary. But I especially when we are dealing about analysis on very specific data sets that are limited in depth and are limited in quantity. You mentioned fraud. With fraud, you can get around on some areas with generating data synthetically, but in some areas you just simply cannot, and you need the human being to be there to actually look at it and analyze it. For AI, you need volumes of data. You need data that you can kind of learn from, and that's not possible in all cases. Like take an example in aviation. If you look at the accidents, and if you would want to kind of AI it and see how you can build a pattern, that's a difficult, if not impossible task. So I would definitely not use AI to try to learn from it and try to make the process of designing airplanes better. It's you just don't have the data.
And Ron, I want to go third rail here. Folks in the AI world, regulation. It's been highly debated since 2023 how much the government should be involved. Because I think obviously people are probably more concerned about the AI apocalypse and Terminator and Judgment Day and all that stuff. I know that's like the extreme of it. But in terms of building these models, should there be someone either just keeping an eye on it, like a third party that independent to be like, yay and naying things? Because I think right now it's so nascent that our imagination is just going to run wild. Like, okay, the robots are going to run the world, but obviously that's not the case in the short term. But what are your thoughts on regulation? And I know you're in Texas. We're not big fans of regulation, so well, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I am in Austin, Texas, which is like this little blue oasis in this sea of red. Um, it's man, that is such a tough question because I'm conflicted as much as anybody. I do think we're going to have systems capable of superhuman intelligence. I really do. How soon? Hard to say. I think it's probably going to. I think we'll have. I think we'll have AGI, artificial general intelligence. It'll be here before we actually realize it because it's going to be jagged. You hear this more and more where it's not like we're going to wake up one day and somebody has flipped a switch and there's this one AI model and it has every superhuman ability in it. It's going to be jagged and we're going to wait. We're going to realize maybe in hindsight that we crossed the threshold. But I do think we're going to cross that threshold certainly within the next 10 years and probably sooner. On the regulatory front, you know, it's so complicated because you've got the China issue, you've got competitive issues, you've got the downside that comes with any type of technology being mandated by some board. That old joke about a horse designed by a committee is how you get a camel. If you can end up in the worst of all possible worlds. Net, I think we're largely doing it right, which is we're exploring, for the most part, cautiously. Might be the exception to the rule, and that as long as we are open-minded and collaborative, and as we start getting closer and closer to these danger points, that the regulation comes top down in a broad collaborative way, I think we'll be okay. But I also genuinely worry about clamping too hard on regulation and losing the race to AGI, from a sort of a geopolitical perspective. I don't want to over-index on that too much, but it is, I think, a real concern.
My view on this is that governments are like so behind, and many they have no clue what they are talking about, and it's case in point. AI could be used greatly to filter out content on social media that is just not true. It's I think we have the capability, but are we doing anything about it? I don't think so. And this is influencing elections. This is influencing societies. This is influencing the brain of our kids. And governments are asleep at the wheel, not doing anything. And tech companies are not really self-regulating the way they could. There is, just look at the social media. There's so much crap out there that could be made better with AI, and we are not. We are instead focusing on how do we increase engagement, which engagement means let me just push out the most ridiculous thing that I can, and that will bring me attention, that will create a lot of feedback and whatnot. But that's where we are. And that's one typical problem. And don't get me started if we are going into defense, because defense in itself, like all the look at the war in Ukraine. I bet Palantir is making a lot of money there, with the drones and everything, and that should be a little bit regulated, in my opinion. At least having an intelligent conversation about it, like let's have a conversation about what the regulation would mean. And I'm not seeing that happening. And at least the governments are kind of asleep at the wheel, in my opinion.
All right, Ron, let's end up in a positive note. Thank you, Gerry, bringing your Eastern European energy to the conversation. But Ron, what does a responsible AI-powered business look like in the near future to you?
Yeah. The things that businesses can do is the average business can't do anything with respect to AGI or ASI or things like that, right? Those are models that can only be built by the frontier labs who are putting literally tens of billions of dollars into their development. Everyday businesses, and I'm talking about, even Fortune 500 businesses, the number one thing they can do to be responsible from an AI perspective is look at the data and look at the bias. And the example I always use is we have built systems that do auto house valuation. And so we had to go look at tax records and sales records going back decades. And we found like the most unbelievably clear racist like policies like embedded in the data. And had we just trained that model on that historic data, it would have replicated those biases. It would have been as racist as anybody, from the 50s or 60s. And here's the thing is, if we'd have deployed that model, a lot of people would have said, well, you were turned down for that loan. The AI did it, and the AI is unbiased and it's super intelligent, and so it's objective. No, that's not true at all. You trained the model to reflect the bias in the historic data because you were lazy and you didn't take the time to do the hard work to identify the bias and remove it. And so the number one things that businesses can do to be responsible is make sure that they're thinking really, really carefully about the data and the modeling techniques, and they are not perpetuating any type of biases or any other negative, and there's more that we could go into, negative traits like that, and then throwing your hands up and acting like you've built some, omniscient objective system.
Nice. Gerry, give me the final word on responsible AI powered businesses.
Remember what you said with garbage in, garbage out? That is so much what you said, Ron, about how you put in bias into your everyday life and the AIs. It's, I think, doing it responsibly and looking at not replicating our own biases and understanding what you're doing. I think that's something that we should do. Not sure if we are doing it. I see that there is a concern out there, and that people are thinking about this more thoughtfully than in a couple of years ago. But you gave an example, ChatGPT. Okay, 3 days ago, I asked ChatGPT one simple question, and I asked it 3 times. I got 3 different answers. I don't know what they are feeding into ChatGPT, but sometimes I'm wondering and I'm scratching my head. I think we should be more responsible in the way we set it up, and we should pay a little bit more attention to this. So yeah,
awesome.
That's my thing.
Gerry. All right, Ron, let's wrap things up by giving a little plug ski here to KUNGFU.AI. If people want to find out more about you and your company, where should they start?
And please check out KUNGFU.AI. That's our web domain, and we've got a podcast called Hidden Layers. It's a little bit more of a technical dive. We'll cover the latest developments in a pretty deep technical way every month. Check that out if you want to learn a little bit more about artificial intelligence.
Awesome, Ron. Thanks so much for the time. Good luck.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.